Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Opera House tonight. Really appreciate your coming out on this wet night. I'm Kit Sherrill, and along with, where is he, John Van Orsdale over here, we're the producers of this great state debate this year, which is its fifth manifestation beginning back in 2004 when John and Dana Dow decided we ought to have something like this every election year, and so it's been continuing ever since, and it's a real privilege to be part of that. I'm going to turn it over to Dana in just a minute, but first of all, I want to make sure I thank folks that need to be thanked. First of all, I want to thank the Opera House here and the crew at the Opera House who have been so generous in supporting us and enabling us to have this evening here. I want to thank Channel 7, John Trees, for being here to film this, and of course this will be out on Channel 7 in the coming weeks leading up to the election. So people that you know have not made it here tonight, make sure they tune into Channel 7 and pick up on the debate there. We also were supposed to have some flowers here tonight from the Boothbay Region Greenhouse. I don't see them, so I won't thank them for that. I also want to thank all the candidates for coming and the generosity of donations that we've received, not only from the candidates, but from the various local Republican and Democratic committees down the peninsula here, so that we could pay for the cost of renting the Opera House, and that's been very gratifying. We've, in fact, gone over budget on that, so I really appreciate that. But most of all, thank you for coming. And now, without any further ado from me, I'm going to turn this over to Dana. Dana Dow.
Thank you for coming tonight. I hope the light isn't so bright that the glare off the top of my head is blinding you all so you can't see up here. This is a great state debate. We could have all stayed home and watched more news on TV, but instead we chose to come here. Here we have no spin on poll numbers. It's not about the Benghazi cover-up. We're not even going to discuss Big Bird here. But tonight we are going to talk about Maine issues, Maine events, and our own local issues. We're going to start with 1-minute introductions to tell us something, where the candidates can tell us something about themselves. You can save your conclusions for the 2-minute closing remarks. I'm going to ask questions and ask you to answer in 1 minute or less, hopefully most of them. I may redirect questions back to you to help clarify your position or clarify an answer. This first session part is going to be roughly about 50 minutes long. Then there'll be about a 5 to 8 minute break and 20 to 25 minutes of audience questions, which you'll be able to come up and get in line to ask your question. And then finally a 2-minute wrap-up. So without any further ado, we're going to start approximately 1-minute introduction, and we're going to start with Stephanie.
My name is Stephanie Hawk, and I'm running for representative for District 61, which is Boothbay, Boothbay Harbor, Westport, Arousek, Georgetown. I grew up in East Boothbay and graduated from Boothbay Region High School. I've been married for 19 years to Andy, who was born at St. Andrews and is a full-time lobsterman. I have 3 kids, Nick, who's 24, he's a lobsterman, Lilia, who's 19, she's a waitress and goes to USM, Andrew, who's 15, and he's a lobsterman and he goes to high school. I also have Perry, who's a 9-year-old golden retriever, and he's the greeter at Hawk Motors. I just got elected for my 2nd term for school board.
Thank you, Stephanie. My name is Bruce McDonald. I live on Back River Road in Boothbay. I've been the state representative now for 3 terms. This will be the 4th term if I get reelected, and final term since we have term limits in the state of Maine. I live on Back River Road with my partner, Georgia Ireland. I have 3 boys and 8 grandchildren, a wonderful family. And I've been in sort of local and state politics probably most of my adult life. 12 years on a school committee in a state far away from here and a time long ago, and another 12 years on local board of selectmen, elected town meeting chair for a long time. And I think what that indicates is that in my upbringing by my very Republican family, actually. I was taught that giving and serving were more important than anything else in this life. So when I had a chance to do that, I took it and I thought I could do a job in that way, serving that way. And when I had a chance to run for state legislature, I did because I thought I could make more of a contribution. So that's why I've been running and why I hope to be able to serve one more time. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. A little bit too much mic there. Thank you for hosting the event. It's great to have a chance to talk to people and have them understand people that they're considering voting for. My name is Chris Johnson, and I'm your state senator. And a true friend suggested I run for office in 2010, just a month after my grandson was born. Have any of you become grandparents recently? And that changed my perspective. And for me, and I think you'll understand, I want a better future for all of our children and our grandchildren. And that's what motivates me to serve. I want to share a sense that politicians are here to serve people again. And I think that we've lost some of that trust in government. And it's through our actions and our conduct that we need to demonstrate that sort of support for the people and earn that trust back again. Augusta is all about choices, and on day one, I made my choice. I stood up and I spoke out, and I cast my votes for all Maine people. The actions taken in Augusta over the last 2 years have been fiscally irresponsible while increasing burdens on families, retirees, and small businesses, causing more people to fall out of the middle class and into poverty. And the conduct has been unbecoming as well. There's been a level of partisanship that doesn't belong in Augusta. I know we can do better, and it's always been my philosophy that people need to work together and attack ideas, not people, and find solutions to problems. It's time the needs of Maine people had a stronger voice in the choices made in Augusta once again, and I want to continue to be that voice. Thank you.
Oh, I've got my own, and I'm going to stand up because it's easier than sitting down, and I suspect the same thing is true for a whole number of people in the audience. I'm Les Fossil, and I've served in almost every possible capacity in the town and in the county, and I've been doing that for a very long time. And I do it not because I'm going to get rich doing that or powerful, but I like to make things work. On a state level, in the legislature, I'm chairman of the Moderate Caucus, and that is what I do is to try to make things work, and that's taking people who disagree and finding common ground. And that's what I enjoy doing. I've been doing it for a long time, and I am going to continue to do that. The problems we have is that the kind of infection that happens on a national level is coming down here, and we have pushed back on that. Some of you may be familiar with the One Maine Coalition, which Elliot Cutler founded and has endorsed Angus King and has endorsed me. And they have because we're the people who reach on both sides of the aisle and try to find common ground. And I know no better way to serve the needs of the people of the state of Maine or to be responsible to the people I love. Thank you.
Thank you. The first set of questions based on the economy. I'll give this one to Chris first, and then you can all respond on it. Businesses like stability and hate uncertainty. Do state budgets affect state businesses, and how do we maintain a good business climate?
Well, businesses really do need stability, and it's a real shame that the bonds that were approved by people in the past for work, some of them in towns and municipalities and businesses were going to be doing that work, were pulled back by the governor, and it left some people that were already beginning work scrambling. The other things that we need besides stability and predictability and what support the state provides to businesses are investment in innovation, research and development. The bond that was vetoed by the governor is a missed opportunity for Maine businesses to find the chance to have a better business opportunity for doing something better, doing something more efficiently, or otherwise having a way to make their business work that they don't have without that investment in innovation. Other things that make a difference are the workforce and what we commit to supporting education and improving infrastructure are both very important to businesses. 77% of them decide where to locate based on whether there's a adequate infrastructure and a capable workforce. So, what we've been doing, cutting education funding in the state and pushing more of it onto towns, pushing up property taxes, these are not good things. And in fact, the increasing property taxes is the sort of thing that also impacts small businesses directly. So we need to actually get back to focusing on innovation, infrastructure, education, and stabilizing what support we provide for businesses and consistent tax policy.
Les? Yeah.
I'm still going to stand. I find it easier. First of all, I run a business. I've run a business since 1975. I know all about what it takes to run a business. Last 3.5 years, I have not paid myself to stay in business. I'm in the construction business. I've never had a workers' comp claim because I've never injured anybody. I pay the full cost of health insurance for all my employees and their families because I think that's what an honorable employer does. I have gone out of my way to stabilize the property tax burden in the state of Maine. We're getting a raw deal from the state on the jails, and I pushed the bill through that cut your property taxes statewide. I did not support a revenue sharing bill that cut the payments to the poorest towns in Lincoln County because I find that unconscionable. What I've found is not only do you need stability to create jobs, but you need the sense that there's a future in the place you live. One of the things that I found interesting, and again, I'm a contractor, small-time contractor. We restore old houses. I've given advice to a lot of people, including the people who have this building right here. I give it for free. That's my community. What I found is if I wanted to hire people who were all had master's degrees to be my carpenters, it'd be no problem. The interesting thing is the average educational level of the people who move to the state of Maine is a master's degree. There's not too many jobs for people with master's degrees in the state of Maine, so they become carpenters or they used to work at these telephone operations. What we need to do is to find the jobs that meet the needs of this community, and we're not good at that. Further, the problems we have is that the expectation is the kind of thing that's been happening in the present is going to continue in the future. So how do we change that mindset? How do we get people to understand the spectacular place it is, Maine, and how do we communicate that around the nation? And that's breaking the mold, and that's an extraordinarily difficult thing. And that's what I plan to continue to try to do. Thank you.
Bruce? I'm going to let Bruce go first, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We had said we would switch around over here, but that's okay. Yeah, I think that stability is clearly a major factor in business success, and I think sometimes when we bash government and say that we need to be pro-business, I don't think it's actually either one or the other thing. For example, businesses require and depend upon a stable and firm and fair banking system so that they can bank their funds, save them, invest them that way. Those kinds of regulations that manage our banking system are the kinds of things that provide the firmness and predictability in a financial sense that business wants. The same is true with the whole financial system, where you don't want to be investing money in unstable stock markets. You want to have stability, even though you know there's some risk, but you want stability around the rules and you want transparency around the rules so that you can understand what kind of risks you're getting into. Businesses want reliable workers, and we need to provide them with that through education as we go along. You can't start cutting back on education and cutting back on the training of workers. Business needs that kind of supply on into the future for trained and well-informed workers. So I think there's a lot of ways in which government can promote that environment of stability, including in the regulatory sphere. I don't think it's wise for government to be changing on a dime as far as regulations go, but we have to look at what the regulations are and look at the kinds of serious issues that most regulations are designed for consumer protection or for environmental protection. And if you start calling willy-nilly for sort of the removal of these regulations, then that would be a bad thing, not only for the economy and for consumers, but for the businesses themselves. I think a good example of what happened in the regulatory realm last year was the outcome of LD1, where there was a bipartisan agreement that was the bill that when the governor came in and he said, we're going to review all the regulations in the state, and we had a holy cow list of all the sorts of things that were going to suddenly change. Well, through a reasoned process in the legislature, both the House and the Senate, we came to a set of agreements about what regulations could change and should change and what should stay. And I think we came to a good decision on that. And I think it was a kind of a calming and stabilizing influence for the businesses that were affected by those regulations. So good banks, good steady, good infrastructure, good financial system, fair and steady regulation, those are all things that government can do to promote a good business climate in the state.
Thank you. Stephanie?
I own a business, and I have for many years, and I've owned other businesses previously. I think that the taxes and the energy is what's holding back businesses. We just got our workers' comp bill, and we're a small 8 employees, and it was $9,000. That's a lot of oil changes. My husband's a lobsterman. Every day he gets pieces of paper in the mail. You have to do this, you have to do this. It costs a lot of money to go fishing now, and that's what I think is hurting the coastal communities. I think you need to lower the taxes. You need to have some less regulations and let people do their job. I think as far as education on it, you need to get electricians and carpenters. There aren't that many around. So if you can get them rolling on it and less regulations on them, I think that would help our business climate.
Thank you. The idea of taxes came up during this discussion. Tax reform failed once. Is there a better way to help stabilize Maine's tax revenues? We'll start with Bruce.
Thank you, Dana. I'm not sure which tax reform you're talking about that failed, but I assume it's the one that we passed in 2010.
One that passed and got turned back by the voters. Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of discussion about that one still, even though it was way back a couple sessions ago. What I see in some of the political advertising is that there were a lot of new sales taxes that were added as that reform bill was moved through. But what that advertising fails to mention is that at the same time, there was a reduction, a fair and reasonable reduction in the state income tax. We brought that plan brought down the state income tax, I think from the high of 8 point something down to somewhere in the range of 6, but it also graduated the income tax in such a way that even elderly people who didn't pay any income tax could actually get something like an earned income tax credit so that they could participate in the benefits of having lower income taxes. And it spread the cuts in income tax, the cuts in the income tax in that bill spread the income tax fairly across the spread of incomes in the state of Maine. It did add those sales taxes because the intention of that bill was to be not to hurt state revenues. You've got to understand, and I think maybe many of you do, that 80 cents of every dollar that the state takes in goes back out either to the communities through aid, general purpose aid, or it goes out to school aid, or it goes out, something like 45% of it goes out to healthcare providers, a lot of them nursing homes, doctors, et cetera, for healthcare that's provided to lower income Mainers and to the elderly and to children who are in poverty. So 80 cents of every dollar that the state takes in the form of taxes goes back out to the communities and to people to provide benefits for them. So the bill that we had that failed was a balanced bill that attempted to lower the income tax. It did put more burden on the sales tax, and independent analyses of that bill showed that the average Mainer, I believe it's a long time ago now, but would have saved a couple $100 based upon that switch between sales tax and the lowered income tax. So that's just one cut at it. I'd like to talk maybe more about taxes that we've done in more recent times, but that you asked about the failed tax reform bill.
Yeah, I'll let Les take a stab at it now, and the bill was rejected by the voters. Is there a better way to?
Okay, well, I've been in legislature 4 years, and I've heard no serious discussion of how to increase taxes or that there would be acceptable to the people of Maine. And I think what Bruce was talking about is, 3-4 years ago now, it came to a people's veto, and I think it was something like a 2/3 vote were against it. So my question for anybody who says that we need more money for one thing, the question becomes, well, where's the money going to come from? Because it's going to come from somewhere. So for instance, though it's not generally recognized, we took something like, if I can get my computer working again, $258 million of state money went into Health and Human Services. Well, where did that money come from? It came from corrections and it came from education. And why did it come? Because for every dollar that we put into Health and Human Services, the federal government matches it 2 for 1 and insists that we match it. And so we pretty much had to. But that being said, there is no more money out there. And so if you're going to, unless you're going to advocate raising taxes, and I urge any other member other than me who believes that we should raise taxes to say so. And if they don't believe in raising taxes, then where is the money going to come from? In this last session, I introduced a joint resolution to create a joint select committee on health care costs. We have, for those of you who don't know already, the highest health care costs in the world in the state of Maine. And according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, which is the source for this kind of statistic, we're also increasing at the fastest rate. It's something like 26% of our state economy is healthcare. That's easily double what it should be. And so anyway, I introduced a bill, Joint Select Committee on Healthcare Cost. It passed the Health and Human Services Committee unanimously, passed the House unanimously, passed the Senate unanimously. Well, why don't we have it? The Legislative Council, in its infinite wisdom, Republicans, Democrats, Senate and House decided we shouldn't do that. Currently, we owe the hospitals something like $480 million, $160 million of it that is state money, the rest is federal. And that's what's sitting over our head when we go back into session. If we can cut health care costs down to where they should be, we've got a chance of freeing up money for the other things we should be doing. If we don't, we have no chance at all. And that's just, where's the money going to come from, guys? In terms of the other issues out there, they all revolve around finding the money to do those things. And I wish there was free money. Unlike the federal government, we cannot print money. And I think that the people in Maine have realized that it makes absolutely no sense at all to bond for those things that are substitute for current expenditures. If we do bonding, we do it for infrastructure improvements, permanent long-range things. And the other thing to remind people is, like I think the other legislative members of this group panel up here, I voted for those bond issues, including the research and development bond issues, and I am not the governor of the state of Maine. So if there's anybody who wants to run against the governor of the state of Maine, I urge you to do it in 2 years. Until then, we're running against each other for legislative seats. And for those of you who have a confusion, the legislature regularly, radically changes the proposals from the governor, and we do because that's our obligation, and that is to find the best thing to do for the state of Maine. And if that means I disagree with the governor, or I disagree with a senator, or I disagree with my own party, that's my obligation. Thank you.
Stephanie, is there a better way to stabilize Maine's tax revenues?
I don't think that doing it through sales tax is the right way. And that's because the elderly, the poor, everybody has to pay. They just pay too much. I think if you get more business and encourage more business in this state, they'll pay more taxes, coming in through their sales tax and their services, that you will get more money.
Thank you. Moving on to Health and Human Services and some social oh, Chris, excuse me. No, yeah, I do.
Hello. We've heard that we can't afford programs and that we have to balance the state budget. And of course, it's correct, we have to balance the state budget. But we've seen a lot of tax cuts in just this last session. And those were tax cuts that mostly benefited people who didn't need the help, mostly rich people. One of the bills passed this spring that 60% of the benefit is going to go to the top 10% in income in the state. Look, people should pay their fair share, and that is for everyone. And the reality is that if you want to understand what sort of burden people are struggling with, when I talk to them at doors and they mention taxes, inevitably I'll ask them whether they're talking about property taxes, and the answer is yes. Okay? Because if you look at all the burdens, state and local, and we should be thinking of that when we're enacting things at the state level, that we do have an impact on local costs and what towns have to do to make up the difference. And 43% of that state and local tax burden is property tax. So the things that have been done this last session that cut revenues for the state and end up causing cuts in revenue sharing to towns, in education funding, which in the last 3 years we've lost $25 million in funding, and not all of it from the state level, but it still impacts towns and having to make up the difference in property taxes to fund education. If you look at how the burden is distributed, then considering state and local taxes together, the poorest fifth income in the state of Maine, those people are paying about 17% of what they make out in state and local taxes. At the top end, the richest 1% of people in this state are actually paying less than 10% of their income in state and local taxes. There's nothing fair about that. And I want to go further and say that while it might be good for businesses to have an opportunity to grow because they have lower taxes, the reality is the taxes that burden small businesses the most in Maine actually are the property taxes. So we're pushing things in the wrong direction. And frankly, if those businesses are going to have an opportunity to expand, they need people willing to come in and give them business. They need people to have money in their pockets to spend in a local economy. And that means the people in the middle class who are carrying far more burden than the rich people in this state, in state and local taxes, we need to be providing them relief, and particularly through property taxes, so that they have a little more money to spend in those local businesses, and we can actually grow the local economy. It's really unfortunate that when we're looking at state policy and we're trying to balance budgets, we don't look often enough at what the real impact is on people, considering both the local tax burden and what the costs are that we're shifting if we cut programs. We cut in the last budget enacted this session. We cut funding for childcare for working moms. Now, that means that some mother who's having a hard time, and that's why they were qualifying for that assistance in the first place, hard time having their child taken care of so that they can hold down that job, they're now trying to make up a decision how to juggle having other people care for their child so they can continue to work or give up working and not be improving their circumstances. That's shifting costs. That's not helping anybody that needs it. These are not the kinds of cuts we should be making. So I think that if we had in this last session, instead of passing a number of cuts, the upper income tax brackets, instead of exempting $2 million estates from inheritance tax instead of just $1 million estates, we would have had more money to fund some of the programs that would have made a difference and actually pass the revenues we should be for education and revenue sharing onto towns so that the property taxes weren't going up so much. How many of you are experiencing rising property tax right now? Yeah, that's our biggest problem in this state. And along with that, we're not actually paying, if you compare us with other states in New England, we're not paying a lot for state government. I know it feels like a burden to you right now.
Yeah, I need to have you summarize.
All right, I'm going to say it real quickly. We actually compare low and compared to the rest of New England. If you look at how many dollars per person are spent on state and local government, our real problems are how equitably that cost is distributed across income levels and how much people earn in the state of Maine. We have low wages and incomes compared to the rest of New England and the rest of the nation, and that's the problem we need to fix.
Thank you. Yes, you can. You've got about 20 seconds for anybody to take any additional comments before we move on.
If you don't help the businesses with the taxes and you go through town and everything's foreclosed on, who do you think is going to pay the property taxes? If everybody's closed.
Thank you. I'm gonna.
I was asking you.
I'm gonna let. Okay. Fine.
I think we should be helping the small businesses. But what I'm saying is cutting the income taxes that were cut in this last session, that isn't where businesses need help the most. They need help with property taxes. But there are other things we should be doing to help small businesses as well. And the research and development investments, the infrastructure, the education, all of those things make a difference. But there are also things, and I guess I'll probably get into it later, that we should be doing for certain industries that need our help in local industry.
Senator Johnson voted for a version of the revenue sharing bill that cost all the poorest towns in Lincoln County money. None of the richest towns. So Boothbay Harbor, Bremen, Bristol, Friendship, Monhegan Island, Noblesboro, South Bristol, Southport got the same amount of money. But the poor towns, Wiscasset, Windsor, Whitefield, Somerville, Waldoboro, all got substantial cuts. I did just the reverse. My bill to make the jail cost fair added $355,000 to tax property tax relief. Chris Johnson's version of the revenue sharing bill cost the poorest towns in this county $118,000. Perhaps he didn't know what he was doing. Perhaps he can answer that for himself. But what I do is I represent the people in greatest need in this county, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. Thank you very much.
Bruce, any additional comments?
Yeah, Stephanie makes a good point. We can't tax small businesses out of existence, or then we wouldn't have any property taxes or sales taxes or income taxes for them to pay at all. The bill in 2010 was intended to lower the income tax rate not only on individuals, but since most businesses in Maine are small businesses and most of them file their income tax as a part of their personal income tax, they're K corporations usually, lowering the income tax does have a positive impact on small businesses. So I think we should be about trying to see what are the most efficient taxes that we ask businesses to pay for the very reason that she suggests. but a wholesale slashing of income taxes in a way that benefits the rich who don't need it does not help small businesses. Most small business owners are in the middle class, struggling to make ends meet, and those are the people that need income tax cuts, significant income tax cuts, and that's not happening in the latest round of cuts that have happened since 2010. I will support fair income tax cuts that don't increase the burden on the middle class and that don't unjustly and unduly reward the rich. And I want to see those income taxes cut in such a way that small businesses can prosper even better.
Thank you. Now moving on to Health and Human Services and Social Programs.
Excuse me. Might I speak? I was asked a question from this side, and I was attacked with a statement from this side, but I actually would like an opportunity to address that.
Well, you've had one chance to address it, and I've got to move on because I've got a lot of I've got a lot of topics to try to cover. In 1999, under the King administration, Maine Care and Medicaid budget increased 49.7%, all in 1 year. This expansion continued for several years until the wheels started to fall off during economic dips. With the cutbacks, which programs are you most concerned about preserving? We'll start with Bruce.
Well, the cutbacks that I'm most concerned about preserving are the kinds of programs that my constituents call me about. For example, aid for drug prescriptions for the elderly. That was part of the cut package. There are people living here in Boothbay who will have to make a choice between staying in their home or having to pay their $14,000 a year bills for prescriptions that keep them alive. That's not fair. That's not the way we should be doing things, and that's the kind of cut that I would be opposing all the way. I'll never support that kind of cut. So that's just one example. I won't go on, but those are the kinds of cuts that are proposed in these budgets, and at the same time, we are forced into them because of these tax cuts that we've been talking about that really unduly favor the rich. So we're hurting poor and middle-income Mainers with things like drug purchases and the drugs that they need to stay alive while we give tax breaks to the rich.
Stephanie?
I would also keep the elderly programs going, but I wouldn't keep the programs, the human service programs for the 20 and 30-year-olds that are more than capable of working that choose not to. I think that's a huge amount of money, and they feel that they're better off in making more money sitting home. So I would tackle that area and leave the elderly and the people that can't work alone.
Chris, which programs are you most concerned about preserving?
Well, actually, quite a number of them that actually are shifting costs and hurting people. The drugs for the elderly was one. I already mentioned briefly the daycare for working moms. There are others like Head Start was cut as well in the last budget. I know that's not your usual DHHS fare, but these are things that are not going to make the situation better for people. They're shifting costs. But several years ago, in bipartisan support, the legislature extended Maine Care to adults of low income. And it was beyond what was required by the federal government, but in analyzing it at the time, and that's still true today, it's less expensive for people to actually be able to visit a doctor and get their health needs taken care of when they have a health issue. Instead of resorting when things get worse and when their quality of life, maybe their ability to hold down a job effectively is impacted by a health issue, going to the emergency room and getting the most expensive care possible through the emergency room. And if they're low income in the first place enough that they can't afford health coverage and they can't afford to see a doctor, then they certainly can't afford that emergency room bill either, which means that the cost just got shifted to everyone else that's paying for those hospital bills. So, I think that when it comes to health and human services, we should be looking at the cost drivers. We should be looking at why some people's service is actually a lot more expensive. And we've been doing a good job in the state of Maine of providing care to some of the classes of people qualifying under MaineCare. Our costs are less than many other states. So the fact that we have a lot more people receiving MaineCare is because we made a conscious decision that that was a lower cost overall for all of us, as not just taxpayers, but as citizens paying those medical bills and hospital bills as well, to deal with the problem that way. What we need to do is move towards a single payer and a case where everyone who needs to see a physician can do so and get health care. That's where we start. We need to then shift the focus for what sort of reimbursement and the mechanism and the incentives away from being reimbursed with a loss of profits and operating costs of insurance companies, but being reimbursed for every incident, every service and care that you receive, towards an incentive for paying health providers to keep people healthy, right? If you are paid to be kept healthy, then you end up with, as Lincoln County Healthcare recently entered into something called the Medicare Shared Savings Plan. It's a pilot program, and it involves, for Medicare recipients, working with them to improve their lifestyle so they remain healthier, and the difference in costs for treating them, from historical costs for that person to what they achieve through this collaboration, is shared with the federal government. A certain percentage of it, less than half, the healthcare provider gets to keep. But the rest of it is savings for the rest of us in what it costs for Medicare.
We've got about 10 minutes left in this session, and you're up.
I'm next, right?
You are.
Okay, we've got two different issues going here. One is the tax cut bill, and for those of you who don't know, that tax cut bill was passed by over 80% of the legislators, Democrats and Republicans. The entire Appropriations Committee, Democrats and Republicans, supported it. The entire leadership of the Democratic Party supported it. There were people on the left and the right who didn't support it, and yet the entire center supported it, including 66 Democrats. So we've all seen some mailers out there. For those mailers to say that you supported this, well, those same mailers should go out to the Democrats who supported it. Most of the Democrats who are running for re-election supported it. So perhaps that question should be asked of them. The second problem is much of what Chris has talked about we're already doing in Health and Human Services. The problem we have is we have, again, the highest health care costs in the world, growing at the fastest rate in the world. We are not paying our bills. We don't have a balanced budget. How can you say we have a balanced budget when we owe the hospitals $480 million? Do you have a balanced budget in your business if you don't pay your bills? I don't think so. Yet that's exactly where we are in the state of Maine. And so we had to make some really awful choices. And again, remember, every single one of these supplementary budgets, until the last one, were all passed by a consensus vote, way over 2/3, Republicans and Democrats. These are not issues. Why we are where we are is because the Baldacci administration made a reasonable decision back before he went out of office, and that was, let's use the AARA monies, the federal recession monies, to fill the gap in our healthcare costs. And what happened when we got back in office in this legislature is that money was gone and we had a huge gap. And the only things we could do is try to tease out of the rest of the budget those monies we could use for healthcare. And it was not adequate. And we had choices like, do we provide insulin for somebody, or do we provide supplements or subsidies for childcare? And we chose the insulin. Awful choices. I wish we did not have to make those choices.
Yeah,
but
we need to summarize.
Yeah, if you think the other alternative is essentially to raise taxes. If you're for raising taxes, raise your hand and let's start a movement. Okay, And we've got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3. I want you to start a petition and get it on the ballot to raise taxes.
We elect people to raise taxes.
We elect people who represent the people of this district, and you'll find overwhelmingly, because I've done my surveys on that question, that while you may think that, the consensus goes the other way, and even if we passed it, even if the governor approved it, it would go right back to a people's veto and be defeated. That's what the numbers say. So how do we live within our means? That's what we're dealing with here. I wish we had extra money. It would be fun.
We need
but
to
we do not.
summarize. Moving on to education. Is 55% state funding for public education still a realistic goal? And if so, how do we fund it? Start with Stephanie.
I think it is a real goal. Again, get businesses in there, more business, more funding. I think our schools are improving dramatically. I think our colleges, they get into things, they're getting into bigger and better things. The robotics programs are coming in, so it's not forcing people, but it's making people want to move to the areas because the schools are improving. That's probably the number 1 question, or number 2, how's your hospital and how's your schools? So, I think the more we improve it, the more money will come in. And yes, we do need to keep funding schools because that's really the key. The kids are our key to our future.
Bruce, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, like Stephanie, I would agree that it's a goal. For one thing, it was passed by a citizen referendum. It's a law. We should be funding education at 55%. I think we're at something like 46% of the cost, the total cost of education at this point. So we still have a ways to go. It is a goal, but we keep cutting taxes and we make it harder and harder to reach goals like that, and we make it harder and harder to reach the goal of funding the hospital debt that is out there. It's a real debt. It's something we owe. We need to pay it. But as we keep shooting ourselves in the foot by cutting taxes, because that's so popular, it's easy to do, we cannot take the responsible steps to up the amount of money that we owe the schools. And if we pay that, by the way, we'll take the pressure off your local property taxes, which are the worst taxes of all the 3, income, sales, and property tax. They're the most regressive taxes. That is a goal. I think we should have it as a goal. I think we should do reasonable, intelligent, make it reasonable, intelligent steps to get to that goal and not keep going backwards. We are going to be going backwards on reaching these goals in the coming legislatures because of that final tax cut bill that we took that was not bipartisan, by the way. I supported the governor's budget 2 years ago, which did contain income tax cuts. I was part of that 2/3 majority, but there was a final tax bill, tax cut bill, which is going to ratchet down income taxes down to a flat 4% over a period of time, depending on whether we have surpluses in the budget or not. That's going to make it harder and harder and harder to have any kind of a goal like funding education at some kind of level that will take the burden off local property taxes.
I'm going to ask our 2 Senate candidates
Still a goal.
to make sure your answers are a little shorter than the last few. Go ahead, Chris.
We've got a number of problems in the state of Maine, and I've already talked about how important education is to solving some of them. It's also really a core part of our society and having capable citizens and capable workers. I do believe in funding 55% of education, and when that last bill came through to ratchet down income taxes over time to 4%, there's a mechanism for that which involved some amount of surplus and building up an account before it triggered the next decrease. And I introduced an amendment to apply that surplus and the money in that fund first towards fully funding the 55% for education for towns, revenue sharing to towns, and the circuit breaker program, because I'd done my homework and found out just how much property tax was of that burden, what the state and local tax burdens are and how they're distributed across our income levels in the state of Maine. I definitely support it. But I've got to go back for a moment to something Les said about losing the federal era money, and that left us with a hole. That's true. But we made that problem worse through cuts in the last session and this session as well. And we ended up having to make deeper cuts to services that people needed in order to pay for reduction of taxes for the richest people in this state that didn't need it. So it's a false argument once you've gotten through reducing revenues by cutting taxes on rich people to say, woe is me, we've got to balance the budget, but we don't have enough revenue, so let's figure out where to cut. I don't buy that argument.
Chris is inaccurate. All the tax cuts are prospective, or virtually all of them. They affect next year. Next year there's going to be a real crunch. Again, as the Baldacci administration was optimistic about the recession ending, so has the LePage administration and this legislature been optimistic about when the recession is ending. If it does not end, we are going to be facing real crunches, no two ways about it. In terms of education, the problem we have is among the 50 states, we rank 9th or 10th highest in per student spending. All the rest of the states in that top tier are rich states. We're not. We're one of the poorest states among the 50. We're about 35th in per capita income, but in real life, we're 45th. Wage income, we're 45th. And so all those people who have checks sent here boost up our income. And the problem we have, if we could keep people who are rich in the state of Maine, it would be no problem. The problem we have in the state of Maine is, in terms of that top 1%, the 1% in the state of Maine has 1/5 the income of the 1% nationally. In other words, we just don't have as many people who generate lots of income. Further, the reason for that is we don't have jobs that generate those incomes. And the result has been that time after time after time, the point somebody gets a second home, they look at the tax burden on that second home, and they change their residency. And it's quite interesting, again, if you look at the coastal towns of this district, in the last 10 years, even though there's many more new houses, they've all lost population. And that's Friendship, Southport, South Bristol, Boothbay Harbor, and Westport Island, all lost population. Those people are living there, but they're living there one day less than 6 months. So if we think that simply raising the taxes on the rich is going to do it, we're already the state we have the highest vacation home population in the state of Maine, and it becomes even larger. I agree completely that we need to find a way to make our taxes fair, but to say that we can simply raise taxes on the people who have the most money and it's going to work. If we were an independent nation, that would work. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They become residents of Florida and South Carolina. That's reality. I don't like it, but that's precisely what's happening. Thank you.
I was going to move on to just one more quick question. Maybe I can come back to you in the next part, and it may come up again anyway with the people of the questions that are going to be asked. I need to have you real short on this. Break is coming right up. With so many schools across the state looking to withdraw from the new school consolidation RSUs, is the forced consolidation worth retaining, or should it be overhauled? And I'll start with Les on this one.
Okay, I think we made a mistake on the original bill. The assumption was that if we had larger administrative units, the costs would go down. If you tunneled into the actual figures, what you found is that there were large districts, medium districts, and small districts that had low overhead rates. And the result by the forced connection of these is mostly we didn't lower rates. In the RSU 12, we created a district that stretches from south to north as far as it is from Portland to Augusta. And it was because people were afraid of not doing that. What we need to figure out with these districts is the way that we can best address the needs of kids with the lowest overhead rates possible. One of the other things that's fascinating is we have, as I said, one of the highest school costs in the country. But you know, we also have the lowest teacher pay, one of the lowest teacher pays in the country. And those two things are unconscionable. There's two reasons that that's happening. One is because the overhead costs are too high. And the second is we're probably not using those teachers or keeping the classroom sizes where they should be. Thank you.
Chris?
Consolidation was actually quite a mixed bag. We did save administrative costs. We did save costs in fuel purchases. We did save costs in contracts for building maintenance and bus fleets and things like that. But Les is right regarding the geographic distribution of the school system for RSU 12 and how that doesn't make sense. So my point is consolidation is a good idea. How we approached it, not figuring out what would be good groupings of communities that would work well and that have shared interests and would form good joint communities in a school system. We didn't take that approach to it, and we should have. But the principle of school consolidation is one to work towards reducing costs without hurting the program. In fact, one of the things done to help the budget in RSU 12 was taking students that were in the smallest school that had very cost-inefficient student-teacher ratios and move them 7 miles to the nearest adjacent school in another town, where the program is actually better for them, what's available for education. And we're now using that building to house administration, to house alternative education, and we've gotten rid of leases on 2 other buildings. So there are cost savings to be had. There are opportunities like that where there's a win-win, where we can improve the program for students while reducing costs. But beyond that, there's also an opportunity for a larger community of educators, where we're asking them to work together to improve skills. They need peers. They need mentoring opportunities. They need to have not just 1 or 2 teachers in a subject that are in a school that are in isolation from all other teachers dealing with those subjects, so that they can have the strongest example in the district. It's a mentor for them to improve their practice and have support of their peers. So the larger community of educators and a larger community of students that have participated in activities together are also good things about consolidation. But we should look at, if we ever do something like this again, or if we start making changes and adjustments to this, how to better organize the communities that are together in a consolidated school district so it makes more sense.
Thank you, Bruce.
I think the school consolidation that we went through was a bad idea in the first place, and it's continued to be a bad idea. I don't think that, I've never seen one spreadsheet that shows any savings that have occurred because of it, and I think, while I don't think a whole lot of harm was done, I think we spent a lot of time, energy, and money looking at a problem that we didn't solve it. I mean, it was oversold, I think, by the Baldacci administration at the time when it was proposed that we could save something like $33 million a year. I did my own analysis, and I thought we could potentially save $13 million a year across the state by consolidating just superintendent's offices, just those top-level offices. I don't know that we've actually even saved anywhere near that. I think that, as Stephanie said earlier, when people look at a community, they look at hospitals, they look at how's your school. I think small local schools are the way to go, and supporting teachers in those small local schools is much the better way to go, and I think we just wasted a lot of time and money looking at how to consolidate. I have no problem with consolidating purchasing, transportation, all those kinds of back-end things, but we were trying to get rid of school committees, we were trying to get rid of budget control, we were trying to consolidate school committees up at much larger levels. I called it the Walmartization of our schools. I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should leave schools in the local communities, small and under local control. I would gladly be part of a movement to repeal the whole thing, or if it didn't cost more money, or certainly look to ease any of the burdens that it has created.
Thank you. And finally, Stephanie, for our last response before the break.
I don't think the school consolidation worked at all. I think it was very taxing on the administrators. I think it was taxing on the schools. I think it took a lot of time and energy and money out of the schools where they could be focusing it somewhere else. I think the small schools, like if you get Boothbay and Wiscasset together, I'm not sure if the kids would go well together just because of all the rivalry going on. But Wiscasset is suffering right now because of the consolidation. So I think they should repeal it, and I think they should start over and just try something else. If that doesn't work.
Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute, hopefully a 5-minute break. We'll be back here, and we're going to have you line up and ask questions, and I'm just going to sample some of your questions so we don't have the first 5 people ask the same question. I hope somebody asked one about the local hospital. I've been asked by some of the candidates, they would just like 30 seconds to respond to some of the points in the last session. That's all you've got. 30 seconds. We'll start with Chris.
A couple of things I want to come back and visit here quickly for you. Les Fossil talked about the revenue sharing, which he said was my bill. First of all, that wasn't my bill, but I did vote for it. And the reason I voted for it is because the towns in Lincoln County don't actually lose money on it. It is reapportioning what the percentages are of the of the revenue sharing that go to towns. And it's because it's going to base it on a statewide average of the mills for education. And it's something that's recommended by the Maine Municipal Association and had the support of the majority of towns in that regard. But it isn't going to actually cost the state, the towns that will have a lower share under that, any money, because it doesn't trigger until the revenue sharing to towns is fully funded, in which case none of the towns lose money. Some of them don't gain as much as others, but none of the towns actually lose money in that. And I knew that when I voted for it. So talking about knowing what you're voting for, I did understand. And it's actually a good thing for the state, it's a good thing for the towns, and I knew that.
Yeah, thank you. That's all we have time. Les, did you want to respond on anything during the session for 30 seconds? Anything that you wanted to say from the last question?
I don't have nothing.
Bruce does, thank you.
The other thing I'd like to say is I think Representative Fossil, my good friend over there, did seem to leave the impression that some of us sitting here might be in favor of raising taxes. Every tax bill that I voted for since I've been there has been a tax reduction, including they've all been tax reductions. I think the plea is that we don't keep cutting taxes in a way that increases the unfairness that's been built into our tax system by asking the middle class to bear an undue share of that burden. Nobody's asking anybody to raise taxes. We're asking for a fair tax system, and that's my response to what appeared to be an implication that some of us might be looking to raise taxes.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, Blas, did you have anything? 30 seconds.
I'll cover 2 of those. The first is the bill that was voted on by 80+% of the legislature, Republican and Democrat, actually makes the tax rates more progressive, not less progressive. Cuts the rates, makes them more progressive. The second thing is while I understand and appreciate the good senator's view on the revenue sharing, that's a view that is not generally held or is not held by a lot of people. And what it gets down to is in the coming year, the bill that I got through saved the taxpayers of Lincoln County $355,000. The bill, the revenue sharing bill, cost the taxpayers of Lincoln County $118,000. And that'll be, I'm sure, the discussion, further discussion, but that's why I did not vote for the bill. particularly when it was hitting the poorest towns the most. And I appreciate that there's differences of opinion on this, and I'm sure we'll have more discussion on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just state your name and your town residence and ask your question.
Okay, my
30
name-
seconds. We got 30-second answers.
Okay, my name's Ron Rimmel. I live in East Boothbay. My question, it's about taxes. And we're electing you to use your judgment and your common sense. And especially when it comes to taxes. And I know people don't like to buy or to pay taxes, but that's how we buy civilization. When a tax bill comes up, you've got to make a decision. Now, there are some legislators who have taken a pledge that has been put out by Grover Norquist to not raise taxes under any circumstances. Will you or have you taken that pledge? Or do you look at every tax bill with the possibility of voting yes or no? Mr. Fossil?
I took that pledge for this 2 years because in my looking at taxes, the taxes in this state are too high. If we have a situation where we manage to get the taxes more under control so it's not a detriment to economic growth in this state, then I won't take that pledge. But right now, taxes overwhelmingly are hurting this state, and so I'm comfortable taking that pledge.
Okay.
I didn't take that pledge. I won't take that pledge. I'm not going to take a pledge to increase taxes. I'm not going to take a pledge to not increase taxes. We ought to be looking at every bill based on its merits and what it means to people. And we need to remember that what we do at the state level also has implications at the local level. It's great that people are talking about decreasing taxes at the state level, but when that means we're increasing taxes at the local level, and that's where it's hurting people the worst, you can't go around saying I'm not cutting taxes. Okay? I'm not raising taxes, because you are. You're raising them at the local level by the consequences of what you're doing at the state level, and we have to consider the whole picture when we make those decisions.
My answer to that would be that I hope that people hire us, or elect us, is I suppose the right word, to use our minds, use our good judgment on every bill that comes up, to judge it on the merits and not be bound by some kind of a pledge. That's why I, for one, don't sign any of these surveys that come. I don't fill out any of these surveys that come around from anybody, even if I support them, because I do not want to be beholden to some kind of prior pledge that I've made without really knowing the circumstances under which I'm going to be asked to do something. I think the people of the district want people who, representing them, who can look at a situation clearly and fairly and make a good judgment based upon the facts in front of them, rather than based upon some prior pledge.
I think you probably don't have to raise taxes if you be a little more responsible with all the money that's going out. I mean, we have a ton of money in welfare that's going out.
Will you sign the pledge or not?
I won't sign anything that's something in the future. No. I won't, because I don't know what I'm signing for something that's 2 years down the road. So no, I wouldn't. I think if you're more responsible, you can take care of matters. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know you want to applaud certain answers, but I ask you to hold your applause and speak with your candidates and applaud them after everything is over. And thank you. Next question.
Andrew Morley, I'm a resident of Boothbay. I've got two real quick questions. The first is for the three gentlemen that have been serving. How'd you weigh in on the whoopie pie, blueberry pie issue? Yeah, it sounds funny, doesn't it? But you know, as a taxpayer, the state, with all the issues that we have facing us, I kind of found it insulting to know that that's what you guys could best use your time in Augusta to hash over. So my next question is, if elected, how do you see the role of government? If you could save money by outsourcing government positions and such to the private sector to try to build private industry versus building an ever-growing government. If elected, which way would you decide to go?
Start down at the end.
I would definitely go with private industry and lower the government. There's way, and everybody that gets a position, not every position, but then they have to hire someone to help them, and it just keeps rolling. So yes, you need lower government, less.
How do you feel about whoopie pies? I think the whoopie pie debate was an embarrassment, a colossal waste of time. I hope that we don't have another one of those debates. If I happen to get back into the legislature, it was just a colossal waste of time. As far as the role of government goes, I sponsored a bill, and it was passed into law in the last legislature. It's called a public-private partnership. It was actually an idea that was brought to me by John Van Oosdel, one of our neighbors and one of the founders of this debate. And the whole idea is that the state has something like, I've forgotten what the real number is, I'll say it's billions of dollars in backlog of construction projects, roads, railroads, ports, airport improvements, those kinds of things. We have a huge backlog that it really started with the cost of the bypass up here in Wiscasset. How can you pay for that? John came up with this idea that it wasn't original, but he looked at things and came up with the idea, why don't we pass a mechanism in the state that would allow private industry to come in and bid on that project, run that project, charge whatever they need to, lease that whole project from the state, recoup their money and make a profit on it, and at the end of some period of time, 55 years, 75 years, 99 years, the lease expires, the project goes back to the state. So private industry makes some money, we get something that we need in the way of infrastructure, and in the end we have an improvement that will help us all. So I sponsored that bill.
We're
fortunately
stretching out
passed,
30 seconds.
and that's I will continue to look for those kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, I'm going to let Les go first so that he doesn't always the end ones don't always have the
Okay,
last
well, I won't be
say.
first or last. First of all, I thought the whoopie pie thing was dumb, and so I kept my mouth shut as much as possible and hoped it would go away just as fast as possible. And one of the things you have to remember is you don't control anything. If you've been in town meetings, you know some of the arguments that going there, and you sort of roll your eyes, and that was one for me. In terms of cost of government, again, as I said, what the cost driver in government is health and human services, and we need to figure out a way to bring the costs under control while maintaining high-quality services, universally available services that are addressing people's needs. And again, other advanced countries right around the world can do this. If we can find a way to do it by outsourcing government, absolutely. The only thing I want to be sure about is that we've looked into both the upsides and downsides of this, because when I see enthusiasms sweeping through the legislature, whether it's whoopie pies or something else, people don't tend to see the downsides. One of my favorite little things was going to be to keep time about how much time each legislator spoke, multiply that times how much it was costing to keep the place in operation, and do a ranking. And maybe then the duct tape award would mean something. Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure we come as close to 30 seconds as possible. Next.
So 30 seconds?
All right.
Oh,
I might,
excuse me.
sorry.
Yeah, that's what I get for not going straight up and down the aisle. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I wasn't actually there yet,
No.
because I was elected in February when that debate occurred. I do agree it's silly. It was a waste of our time. But I think the role of government fundamentally is to do the things for the people that they can't individually do for themselves. And we have to figure out, in every case where we're looking at possibility of privatization, I guess I pretty much agree with Les. You need to look at the downsides as well. It's not just cost. There are ways that you can be improving the efficiency of departments that have nothing to do with privatization. And it has to do with actually spending the effort necessary to look at the processes that you're following and how many times a piece of paper crosses your desk and just in getting one thing done. And getting the people together that actually do that kind of work with the facilitator, lean management or otherwise, to figure out the better way of doing it and improve efficiencies. That's a way to save cost. It doesn't involve, you don't implement by simply whacking a budget.
Thank you. I'll let you go first on this question so I don't mess up again.
Hi, I'm Ryan Layton. I'm from the Boothbay Register. And the Edgecombe Eddy School, the future of it is being discussed right now. There's a decline in enrollment. And I believe I see Stuart Scott here, the selectman, and he estimated that the town could save $134,000 a year if they sent the students elsewhere. What do you think is the best option moving forward for the Edgecombe Eddy School?
Well, first of all, I don't think that's a decision for me to make. I think it's a decision for the community to make. But I do believe that they need to look at what it means to the community to have that school there, not just what it costs them as a community to operate it. And you've got to be looking at things like the fact that that school was one of the best in teachers and outcomes just in recent years with awards they received. That has to mean something to you. So you have to ask whether you want to send your children to another school, whether you feel they'll be getting the same education, or whether you'll be destroying something that is actually an opportunity to provide an excellent education for kids, and that your goal instead should be attracting other students to come there so you solve your enrollment problem and you've dealt with your operating costs. So I think the community has to decide it, but there are lots of options that could be keeping a good quality education alive there instead of simply looking at getting rid of it because of the costs you see.
Yeah, Les? And Bruce? And,
This is all about supporting the communities, and if the community feels that they should retain that school, I am, as a legislator, I'm not going to say they have to take it away. It was one of the problems with the consolidation bill, it took schools away from towns that really wanted to keep them. And one of the reasons we have a charter school in Cornville is precisely for that reason, is they felt the value of a community education and a community school. And I think we should support communities.
Bruce?
I would say ditto to all the comments that have been made. It's a local decision, and if it's an excellent school as it is, it's something that the community needs to weigh against the cost and make their own good decision about whether to keep that school or not.
I think it's up to the town, yes, same as everyone else. Nothing's better than a small community school and growing up in a small school, and you have that for the rest of your life, and once you take it away, it's gone.
I'm Andrew Twaddle from East Boothbay. This is your hospital question, I think. As you well know, Lincoln County Health has decided to close the emergency room at St. Andrews Hospital, which would eventually mean the termination of the license for the hospital. My question is, I guess, partly twofold. One is, what is your general take on that, as to whether this is a good or a bad decision? And two, what would you, as a legislature, how would you as a legislator be able to contribute to a solution to this problem?
Start with Bruce.
I guess the question was, first of all, do you think it was a good or a bad decision? Is that what you asked? I think that's what I heard. I think it was a bad decision for a whole lot of reasons. I do think that Maine Health, which is the larger corporation that governs St. Andrews Hospital, has a kind of cost efficiency model of how they want to look at things. How can they put the most people through their facilities at the lowest cost? That's, I think, that creates a problem for the way they look at a smaller hospital. There is a completely different view that would look at small hospitals just in the same way that Stephanie talked about the values of small schools. There's a lot of data out there that says small hospitals, healthcare closer to people, has both lower costs overall and better health outcomes for people. I think Maine Healthcare made a bad decision. As you probably know, I'm part of a group that's trying to reverse that decision in some way. And one of the things that we can do as legislators is to give people a choice as to whether or not they want to create a community hospital district in their communities. And this is an opportunity that we have, an option that we have here, although I'm still not sure whether I'll be submitting this bill, but I have put in a bill to create a community hospital district here, which would give voters here in Boothbay, Boothbay Harbor, Edgecombe, and Southport, if we go forward with that bill, it would give them the opportunity to vote on whether or not they wanted to have a community-based hospital here, which would be run by a public board, elected by the people, open and transparent, and responsible to the people. That's one kind of tack that a legislator could take in this sort of situation.
I am a frequent flyer of St. Andrews with my family. I'm there. I try to go 8 months without going, but it doesn't seem to pan out. So it broke my heart when I heard that St. Andrews was closing. My brother's family is a Gregory, so there's a lot of connections to St. Andrews. Do I want to close? No. What would I do in legislature? I don't know. I'd have to talk to people that know a whole lot more about it than me and then go from there.
Thank you. We still have 2-minute times for closing remarks. I'm just going to ask the audience.
You missed us.
I missed both of you?
Yes. That's good.
That's good. Okay, 30 seconds.
Okay. First of all, I think that the decision-making process by Lincoln County Healthcare was a terrible one. And what happens when people operate in silos, and they clearly were, they get all kinds of ideas that they think are good, and then they bring them to the larger world, and they get egg all over their face. And that's what they've done. That being said, I have to remind you that we have the highest health care costs in the world, and we have the fastest increasing health care costs in the country, and it's fundamentally unaffordable. It's why the state of Maine owes the hospitals currently $480 million that we can't pay. So we have to figure out, from my point of view, how do we provide high-quality health care that's universally available at an affordable cost. That's the scheme. And if that means we have no hospitals in the state of Maine, or if we have a hospital on every street corner, that's what we have to consider, because that's what the obligation I have to the people of the state of Maine. In terms of this particular issue, there's going to be to form a community hospital, there's going to be two big barriers. The first of all is look at the hospitals who have built new buildings. You're talking something like $100 million. Until someone tells me where the money's going to come from, it's going to be a non-starter. The second thing, okay, I've got to get into one more thing, and that is we just went through the certificate of need process, liberalizing it to allow communities like Boothbay to do more things and not get the state's permission. But this was an agonizing process, and mostly it was my party that wanted to do it and the other party that didn't. But to have a community hospital, you're going to have to throw the certificate of need process on its ear. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's realistic. I think you're going to find that the other 2.5 million people who are represented by this are not going to agree. So I don't see how this is going to happen. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's the reality. Thank you.
Chris?
I think that the community needs an opportunity to try and make something different happen. My take on the whole decision process is that, you know, from the perspective of Lincoln County Healthcare, it was a good business decision. That doesn't make it a good community decision. And I know that there are two efforts afoot, and my goal is to help further both of those in any way that I can assist. But I'm not central to that process because this is a community thing, and it's with Lincoln County Healthcare. But the two efforts are to attempt to negotiate with Lincoln County Healthcare whether there's anything which, if the community could change it, would change the outcome of their decision. And the other is, as Bruce mentioned, to allow the community to charter a regional hospital. And if the community makes the decision that that's something which is feasible, that they want to proceed with, then I would support the legislation to allow that process and let the towns in the area decide for themselves to proceed with that if they choose to.
Thank you. One more question.
Can I say something in response to what
I wish we had time for it, but we're already 5 minutes over time. You can in your closing statement.
Hi, my name is Delta Chase, and I am the daughter of a small business owner here in this region, and also I work for healthcare, large healthcare. And so I'm very concerned with what I hear about healthcare costs in Maine, as I've heard here tonight. I'd like to direct my question to Representative Fossil. You voted for a rate hike bill that increased premiums for 9 of 10 small businesses. As a state representative candidate, and here even tonight, you said you want to reduce healthcare costs. You just said it in your last statement. How do you justify voting for this bill with these results, a bill that you thought was one of the greatest accomplishments of this last legislature?
First of all, I did not say it was one of the greatest accomplishments of this last legislature, so whoever said that to you was not correct. Second of all, the problem, you're confusing health insurance with the underlying health care costs. So long as the underlying health care costs are rising at 7.8% per year, the insurance costs are going to rise at that level. In the last year, the average rate of increase was something more like 3%. In previous years, it had been something in over 10%. The number of businesses who had health care increases went from 97% down to 90%. So we're in terrible shape. There's no two ways about it. But you're not going to get any further towards it by a health insurance reform. It's reforming and improving the cost of health care. And if you think it can't be done, I will cite, first of all, I'll go to Colorado, that 12% of their economy is health care, not 26%. Or we'll go outside the country to Switzerland, which has the same demographics as we do, has a completely private system, and it's 12%. So these kinds of things can be done if we have the will to do them. And incidentally, my feeling is no matter who's in charge on a federal level, less money is going to come to the state of Maine every year. And unless we figure out efficiencies that don't hurt people, we're in terrible trouble.
Thank you. Bruce, would you care to comment on that question?
Just briefly, yeah, I think the bill that the questioner was referring to is LD 1933. That is a bill that, if that's the correct bill, that is a bill in which the proponents said that we could lower health insurance costs by allowing insurance companies to charge up to 5 times as much for a product that they charged a healthy person. They could charge up to 5 times as much to a sick or elderly person or a person who lived in some of the northern counties of the state where health statistics show that people are less healthy. The previous situation before that was we had constrained insurance companies to no more than 3 times. So a product that cost $100 for a young healthy person in the old days before this bill could not cost more than $300 for a sick or more elderly person or someone who lived in one of the less healthy counties. That's just one example of what this bill did, was giving insurance companies greater latitude to charge more money. The bill released the band from 1 to 3 to 1 to 5. So insurance companies could charge 5 times more for a product than they for that kind of population than they could before. They also instituted a $4 tax on claims that were made in the individual insurance market, that everybody who has individual insurance, not commercial insurance or not Medicare, but individual insurance, that everyone in the private insurance market is going to have to pay to fund what's it called, a high-risk pool. So it was a bad bill, I think, all the way around, and it's increasing costs. I have permission from one business locally here, I won't give the name, but their costs have gone up 27% this year. Small businesses are being hurt by this bill. It was a bad bill. I hope that we can do something about it in the next legislature.
Stephanie, and then Chris will be the last speaker tonight.
I wasn't voting up there,
Okay.
so,
Did you have a comment on it?
no?
Okay. Chris?
I didn't vote on that bill either. It happened in 2011, but I would like to comment for a moment on its impact. And I would have voted against it if I'd had the opportunity. There are a number of businesses that have seen huge rate increases under this bill because of the provisions affecting older workers and more rural workers. And you have to realize, first of all, that this district is we have in Lincoln County, the oldest county in terms of percentage of people age 65 and over. And Maine has a higher percentage of older people, and we're drawing more retirees to the state all the time. So part of the health cost driver that Les was talking about is the reality of our demographics. It's not because we're doing a worse job than other people. And yet, the latest figures from the Kaiser don't place us as the most expensive. We're number 4 or 5 now. But a 35% increase in the health insurance rates for Mid-Maine Restoration and Edgecombe, and I will mention them because that was already in the press at the end of last year, that's what they were facing for an increase in their policy costs because of the changes enacted in that bill. And furthermore, an analysis recently, based on the filings of all of the insurance companies with the state of Maine Bureau of Insurance, supports that. Yes, there are fewer people that saw increases, but there are a lot more losers that saw huge increases. And so what we've got is a case where we're creating winners and losers, and the cost of that health coverage is going beyond the means of more people. We've got already 10% of the people in the state of Maine that aren't covered by Maine Care, aren't covered by their employer, and can't afford the health insurance on their own. And that's the problem we need to solve, instead of making it worse and putting more people uncovered.
Yeah. Thank you. 2-minute closing remarks. We're going to hold you exactly to 2 minutes. Going to begin at this end of the table and go right down the line.
Okay, I'll go to health insurance because we're there. I'm the only person Stephanie and I are the 2 people who potentially actually pay these bills, and I've been paying them for decades. I pay the full cost of health insurance for my employees and their families. I am also, previous life, 30 plus years ago, was actually a health insurance underwriter. The rates for health insurance the profits are regulated. The insurance companies don't get any more money. The rates change. That's absolutely true. My rates, I've had 35% increases under the old plan. I actually figured out a way to lower my rates this time. And incidentally, the problem's worse than you think. Chris was citing that 10% are uninsured. The real problem is a huge number of people, and I suspect people in this room are underinsured. A policy that has a $10,000 deductible, unless you have $10,000 in the bank, or a $20,000 deductible, doesn't amount to insurance. And we're also not really talking insurance here. Insurance is for unavoidable, unexpected losses. It's what your automobile and homeowner's policy is about. What we're talking about when we say health insurance is losses that are often affordable and expected. And the society has a right to protect people for that, and should. The question is whether it can be done by insurance, and our insurance system was failing. It was imploding. So we need to figure a different way, and for those people who don't think this was the best way, then we need an alternative. Thank you.
Chris, your closing remarks?
Thank you. In my opening remarks tonight, I said we can do better, and I meant that. And people who know me know I'm always drawn towards fixing things. And we know there's no magic fix that will solve our problems. But we've all worked hard to accomplish goals at one time or another, and know firsthand they're not achieved by heading in the wrong direction. The lives of Maine people will be improved by writing our course and taking all practical steps to move forward. Everyday Maine people deserve government working in their interest again, not marching to an ideology disconnected from the daily reality of our struggles. The lives we want for ourselves, our neighbors, our children, our grandchildren are achievable. And we just have to start focusing on the tried and true things that will get us there, like they did in the Great Depression. Investments in the long term, in quality education, infrastructure, innovation, and creating opportunities for our small businesses. Real tax fairness, considering effective tax rates of all state and local taxes instead of ignoring property tax increases while creating tax breaks for millionaires. Supporting the vibrant communities, traditional industries, local foods, the arts, and being good stewards of the stunning natural resources which make Maine such a wonderful and unique place to live. And I've been tackling those problems not just in Augusta, but working with the Shellfish Committee in Waldoboro, the Clary Lake Dam hearing in Jefferson and Whitefield, and with people seeking to fund school health coordinators and many constituent issues. Because I've been listening to you, and I've been representing our shared values both inside and outside of Augusta. A recent report on Maine said, "We cannot gauge an economy by its tax rates, the size of its government, or the growth of its corporate bottom lines. These are only ideological indicators. The true measure of any economy is how its people are faring, especially its hardworking families. If you believe your time has come, that government should be working for you once again, I ask you to vote for Chris Johnson for state senator." Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce, your closing remarks?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for this opportunity to talk with you all. I have been your legislator for the last 3 terms. If I am reelected, it'll be my 4th and final term, and I would eagerly accept your vote to go back and continue to work on things in Augusta. I think, aside from how we might vote on particular things, you probably want to know what kind of people we are or what kind of views we have about how things ought to work in the world, and especially with respect to how we might behave in Augusta. I think mostly I look for solutions that are just and fair to as many people as possible. If I'm looking at a situation that affects my conscience, that is a part of my core belief, I will vote my conscience, and I hope that will match up with how other people see the problem. But if they don't, I still have to vote my conscience. If it isn't a matter of conscience, then I think the way you look at things is you try to find out what the majority wants and needs, and you try to fulfill that need. You try to vote with the majority. And if you don't know, if it's not a matter of conscience and you don't know what the majority views on a subject are, you try to use common sense, you try to use research, you talk to people, you look at the problem from as many different angles as you can, and you try to make a good decision. So I can't promise you how I'll vote on any particular thing when they come up with, there is thousands of bills every session, but I'll use that kind of measure as I look at what we have before us. The other aspect of being a legislator is that it's supposedly a part-time job. I've been pretty much a full-time legislator, and a lot of the work that you do, besides working on laws, is helping people locally with all kinds of problems that they have with state government, and those are some of the most gratifying kinds of things that you can do, whether you can actually help them or not. I was working on 2 of them today, just this morning. So those kinds of things come up all the time, and those are the sorts of things that you have to be ready to do if you're going to be a good representative of the people of your district. So I will promise that kind of view as things come up, and I will promise to continue to try to help the people of our district if I am reelected. Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you to my family for being so supportive during this campaign, and all the people that have come into my office, the big strays of them, giving their advice and kind of pushing me along because I have no idea what I'm doing. And a big, huge thank you to John Bertollet, who has been there since day one, and he's just been there through thick and thin. Like I said, I'm not a politician. I've never run for anything like this. Just kind of going step by step. I've been in the business world for a lot of years. I know what it takes to make a payroll. I know what it takes to keep the things going. I know what it takes to keep the staff going. Working at a restaurant at night, you get a big sway of people. I think you need to help not only the very poor, but you need to keep the wealthy here too. You got to keep them all here. So that would be my goal, is to keep everybody working, keep everybody vacationing here, and keep everybody happy. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to go over time and allowing these candidates to express their answers more fully. Thank you very much. It's been my privilege to be here, and we are finished. Thank you very much.